Hello and welcome to this special edition of the ILEETA Learning Lab. I'm Joe Willis, the Deputy Executive Director for ILEETA, and I'm here with Kerry Avery today to talk about AI-powered training from course design to delivery. She's going to be presenting this at the 2026 ILEETA Conference and Expo, March 16th through the 21st in St. Louis. Kerry, super excited to talk to you about this. I know you're very passionate, probably the most educated person I personally know on this, and you definitely have a reputation on LinkedIn for being a go-to person for it. So without any further ado, over to you. What's coming to ILEETA this year from Kerry Avery?
All right, thanks, Joe. So looking at AI and I know there's a lot of chatter, kind of endless chatter, I guess, around AI and what it can do. And so it's a constantly evolving thing. So it's a little interesting when I submit to present at a conference or to do a webinar. I don't actually design anything until a couple of weeks beforehand because the evolution just keeps moving. Like what I'm presenting or demonstrating this year won't look the same as last year. There were things that I presented on last year at the conference or in webinars that I talked about saying, ChatGPT can't create images and some of the other ones, Claude can't do slide decks, like et cetera, and now they can. So it is a constant evolution. I spend a lot of time every single week reading newsletters, definitely testing AI. I use AI almost every day in my own work for design and development. I'm very lucky to have projects right now that don't have a privacy component to them. We're teaching law, policy, things that are very public. So it gives me a lot of opportunity to go in and experiment and figure out what tools work, how they work, what I can use them for, and what they don't work for. It's definitely, AI is not the panacea. It's not going to just design all of our training for us and put it all out. So there's a lot of experimentation on what works and what doesn't work. And every time I have something figured out, then they release a new version and it all changes and I've got to go kind of back through the process again. But I'm always really excited and I really enjoy sharing it with people. Not as much now as we're the third year into AI. I used to really enjoy people seeing it for the first time, putting in that prompt and them seeing how fast it can write like a lesson plan or an outline or write learning objectives. And the shock on people's faces was a lot of fun getting to present and see people. It's exactly what I look like the first time I tried it. And so I do really enjoy sharing that with people. But this year, I really want to focus on what advances we've had and things that we couldn't do last year. Slide decks being a big one that it really struggled with. Like we had Gamma, and Gamma is specific for slide decks. But now we're seeing the large language models like Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini are now able to create slide decks. So that's sort of changing how I'm using AI and large learning models for my design process. So we're going to be going through that. The kind of the angle of my presentation or my session at ILEETA is we're going to design from scratch. So we're going to pick a topic from scratch and we're going to see within the hour and 45 minutes that we're there, how much training we can actually develop. So we'll pick the topic and go from beginning to end, basically writing outlines, lesson plans, learning objectives, and then taking that and actually doing research on content, and then taking some of that content and actually creating materials for classes. So slide decks, handouts, job aids, all that kind of stuff, and how to use AI to create more engaging and effective methods within your training. So we're just basically going to run from beginning to end using different AI tools. I'll demonstrate as many as I can and show you how much we can develop in pretty much an hour and a half.
Love it. And, you said AI isn't a panacea, right? And I remember the webinar we did nearly a year ago now, I think, pretty close to it, a long time ago, that you mentioned that AI is like that eager assistant who wants to show up, do its best for you, and sometimes it's not accurate. And I know you're seeing it for sure. Some of the absolute garbage training that is being pumped out of artificial intelligence and dumped into various, whether it is a LMS or some other platform. And so what guardrails do you see and are you recommending in the presentation you're doing to kind of help with that first of all, the eager assistant. Second of all, to prevent garbage from just arbitrarily being dumped into the content.
Right. And this, I did recently do one of my newsletters on this. So talking about, we now have an overload of content. So in the past, we've kind of struggled and pieced our content together and had it all in a folder. But now with AI, we can run multiple iterations. So now we're having to look more at organizing our information because we're actually ending up with too much, which is certainly causing some issues. As we look at AI is reading sort of the entire internet and what's on there. And we know that a lot of stuff on the internet is outdated. It wasn't correct to begin with. There's sort of myths and fallacies. And so the biggest thing and the biggest guardrail that we have to have in place is us. And this was my original realization the first time I used AI and thought, wow, this is going to take my job. Like, this is what people have been paying me to do for 20 years. Write learning objectives, write lesson plans, design training, all that kind of thing. But the more I used it, the more I realized that it's just going to allow me to be more efficient and work faster. It's not actually going to replace me because I am very much still needed in the system. So we still need a lot of expertise, which is why we use the idea of the assistant, is that assistant needs a lot of supervision, and that's us. Like, we are the supervisors. We're ultimately responsible for everything that comes out. But I mean, there is a temptation if I go in and ask it to create a video for me, and I can see there's small errors in the video, but it's a lot faster for me to just push the video out than it is for me to go in and open up a video editor and actually try to change it, or to keep prompting to get what I want, which doesn't usually work out very well. We start out with something and the first version is decent, but when you start prompting it and trying to get it to fix things, it tends to fix the wrong things and it recreates the same version, which these are some of the things that are changing with the advancements, but to date, it still doesn't do a great job. So really the biggest guardrail is our supervision and our knowledge and expertise, which is my concern. My actual concern for the future now is not AI taking my job. It's where do we get the next generation of experts? Who else is going to want to sit in university for 6 years like I did, studying adult learning theory and reading theories and actually understanding cognitive science? And because AI can do so much of that heavy lifting for us. But if we lose our expertise, we're eventually in the next generation not going to be able to supervise AI anymore. But I'll say, like, wholeheartedly, I still correct AI all the time. Yesterday on LinkedIn, I shared, someone had put a funny picture up, and it's a guy asking AI, like, is this mushroom poisonous? And then it shows him like dead and his little gravesite. And then AI saying, oh, sorry, I was wrong. Yes, that mushroom is poisonous. Did you want to learn more about poisonous mushrooms? And I'm like, that's exactly it. Like, I correct AI all the time still. Nope, yeah. You used, the learning objective that you wrote doesn't have actionable verbs, even though it knows. I've prompted it numerous times to use that, but it will still kind of revert back. And so it can produce a lot and it looks really impressive, but it still needs a lot of supervision. So
yeah, and
our expertise. We're the guardrail.
We are the guardrail. And it's funny you mentioned that mushroom one. I saw that, and my immediate thought was less about AI being that eager assistant who doesn't do the research on poisonous mushrooms very well, was inspiration to do better prompting. Because I can ask, is this pen edible, right? And AI will tell me, yeah, you can eat that pen. I wouldn't recommend it. And it probably knows with a pen, you shouldn't, but a paperclip is edible. And so it inspired me to do a better job of prompting, was kind of what I took from that when you posted it. So what would you say at this point, and you kind of covered it a little bit in what you just offered there. So first of all, the lack of experts, those who are truly educated and know training design and presentation. And I think you know as well as I do, there's a gap between those two things. And we have experts in presentation and experts in design. And sometimes we get a good blending in the middle, and we see a lot of that at ILEETA, yourself included. But I think we're losing a little bit. This is Joe Willis' opinion, kind of helped me work through this. Losing a little bit of authenticity, especially when it comes to storytelling. The number of things I see on LinkedIn, and actually there are jokes about it now, about it's Tuesday, give me 7 things I learned from my kindergartner yesterday about business, right? And now I have this made up story about a kindergartner I don't even have. And, I think there's going to be a challenge here in the authenticity and delivery. And so, what would you add there? Like, how do we maintain our authenticity with something that is ultimately more creative than we are?
Yeah. This is a little bit outside law enforcement, but I used to have a travel blog, which I used AI to help to assist with writing all my articles for travel blog. And it was really interesting because I would say, oh, I want to write on these are the products that I like to use. And so I would list like, these are some of the products that I like to use when I travel. And it wrote this whole blog and put stories in. And one of the stories was, oh, this time when we were in Thailand and we got caught in a torrential downpour. But luckily I had my documents in this like secured envelope and it kept my passport dry. And I was actually taken aback and a bit shocked because the story of us being in Thailand in a downpour was real. That really did happen to us. But the whole like stuff in the envelope and like none of that existed. We were we were going to a mall in Thailand. So I didn't have my passport and stuff with me, but it was just how fast it was able to create a story that was partially true, but the rest of it actually wasn't true at all. So that, again, that was kind of early on in the AI days, really showed me that it's paying attention. I'm not even sure where I released that tidbit of information about being caught in the downpour in Thailand. But so in some ways, it is kind of remembering things and creating stories. And like for me to get around that, I just keep giving more information. A lot of my prompts are very long, but it's like just train of thought. I know there's a lot of push for kind of prompt libraries, and I encourage them in agencies where you want consistent responses. If you want your lesson plans to work the same, then prompt libraries are good. For me personally, I don't really use them. For me, I use very much a conversational approach. And so I'll go in and start giving like a story or giving more examples, especially when I'm writing and I have to prompt Claude, and now Claude has memories. So one of my instructions to Claude is to not make things up, because it used to make up stories all the time. Oh, last week when I was designing something for this law enforcement agency, I ran into this problem with scenarios. None of that happened. Like I wasn't designing scenario. I'm not even working on anything that looks like that. And so I now have an instruction to Claude to not make up stories. But it's up to me then to input, either edit afterwards with my stories, or I have to give more information. I want you to talk about, I had this situation, and I'll just write it all out in the prompt about this is what happened. And then it will incorporate it really well, usually better than I would have, or I just do the editing afterwards. But I agree, it is very quick. Claude is trained in a lot of my writing. So it knows how to use like my dry, sarcastic humor, and Claude nails that every time. And it's the only, that's my writing model for sure. They all work really well, but I guess I've worked in Claude so long and it just seems to nail the writing for me. But it can really capture writing that actually sounds like I wrote it. So it's interesting, but it would definitely make up stories. And still from time to time in writing my newsletters, it still does that. And I have to keep correcting it, saying, take that out. I don't want things that are like, I want my newsletters to be authentic to my own experience. So stop making up stories about things that I didn't do.
I love it. No, that we're on the same page there. And what I've started doing, with chat is actually turning on the microphone and actually just voice conversing with chat. And I know there's like some great, memes and jokes and videos out there about it, but I feel like, and I've actually taught an entire class that I needed a lesson plan for that I never had, because I've just taught it so many times. I never did a lesson plan. Well, I had to turn it into an agency so they could get it accredited. And I was like, I'm not going to sit here and type out a lesson plan, but I also don't have anything written on this. And so I literally taught the class right here in my office, and it ended up producing a really good lesson plan. And so I think there's space to experiment with some of that. I love what you've given us as far as the guardrails and accountability, and don't outsource your credibility, right? Like let you be the authentic storyteller. And it should never be given the opportunity to damage our reputation by saying something that we did that we never actually did, right? And so, yeah, nail on the head with that. And so you've done ILEETA every year for the longest time. You know this audience incredibly well, so you know what they're looking for in a classroom. Tell me a little bit about Joe Willis is excited about this class, and I honestly am. When I show up, what am I going to get from you? What am I going to experience in the classroom? I love this thing where you said something about you're going to create everything live.
Right. So that was the biggest challenge the very first year we did this, was the internet access. Thankfully, we have worked through that now, and it's worked every year. So that's always the biggest concern, is the tech side of it. But in preparing for the session, I open up pretty much as many of the AI programs as I use, and then we just start walking through the process. It is a little like drinking out of a fire hydrant. It is a demonstration, so I'm going to be jumping kind of from one tool to the next. But I always have a resource sheet that's available afterwards that has links to every single program with a small description of, I use Notebook. Notebook, I'm going to have to update it now because the things that they can all do have changed. But Notebook can do, this is what Notebook does. I used ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and so I put links to all of them so that people can go and try them afterwards. It's not uncommon for people to have either their phone or their laptop, and they might be like trying out some things while I'm demonstrating, which is great. And sometimes they'll be able to share what came up if they tried something. So that is certainly more than welcome. If people want to try to follow along, I just tell them you don't have to memorize all the tools that I mentioned. Like, that's accessible afterwards, because I can see them kind of panicking, trying to write it all down. And how do you spell that one? And so we don't, it's just a kind of a more of a flow and demonstration of showing these are different ways we can use it. And then it's really going to take kind of some reflection afterwards to think about how to incorporate it into your design process, like you were saying. And that was where I see all this opportunity, because I can't count how many times I've been asked to evaluate training for large agencies, and they send me their training, and it's PowerPoints with no speaker's notes, no lesson plans. And we've never, ever been resourced to do that. There's never been enough instructional designers and people who can write lesson plans and write learning objectives. And so now I see an opportunity for us to actually get all of our training properly documented, something that we haven't been able to do in the 20 years I've been working in training design. So that's some of the areas I'd really like to see agencies up their game now, is having proper lesson plans, proper documentation, so that if you do have to go to court and testify on your training, we have the documentation for that, not a PowerPoint with no speaker's notes in it.
Perfect. And I mean, there's just so much great stuff already happening here. One of the things that I'd be curious about is, if I'm going to attend your session, do you have something that I can reference? I know you got a Substack and a website, and I've seen what you share, the Google Doc that you share, or at least an old version of it, that I could share either with our audience here, or we could put in the guidebook app or something that gives them something they can kind of reference and research, come a little bit more prepared to have this conversation with you. Is there something you could do along those lines, or that you recommend I prepare myself with?
I mean, the reference sheet is sort of the biggest one. I can make it available. We can make it available in guidebook ahead of time. That's something awesome. I haven't done in the past, but that would certainly give people an opportunity to go in if they want to try and play around with some of the tools ahead of time. Then if they come with questions, if we don't have time during the session, I always hang around afterwards. I don't have the mental wherewithal to attend a session right after I've presented. So I'm always available after I present, or people can find me anytime during the week. I'm usually pretty easy to spot. I had one year, quite a few years ago, but it was like Thursday, and somebody yells out there like, "There you are." I turned and I was like, "Who are you?" And they're like, "Oh, we've been looking for the girl with the purple hair all week, and so we finally found you." So usually people can find me. I'm always around during the conference, but definitely after I present. So if anybody tried anything specific and they have questions, I know one of the questions that came up last year was, what would you use when you're presenting live to record? That's something I haven't done. I haven't participated. I know there is programs. I think Whisper is one of them that they're starting to use. So sometimes I don't have experience with the questions, but it helps me know what people want to know or what people want to learn about. And I can go and do some more research and then incorporate anything I couldn't answer into like a future newsletter, which I release. I have one on LinkedIn, and then Substack is like an expanded version of the newsletter that went out on LinkedIn for people that want much more detailed kind of step-by-step how to do different things. So questions always help me because they give me future topics for newsletters and things to write about. So that would be great if people want to play around or just bring kind of the questions or examples of how you have used it, because there's a lot of people that are working in areas that I don't necessarily get to do a lot of work in. So that also helps to kind of our collective knowledge and experience. If people can bring stuff they're doing for scenarios, if they're using VR, or if they're like different areas that I don't necessarily get to do a lot of work in, would be very useful for everybody, me included.
I love it. And, one of the things I like about the way you present, and there's a lot of this at ILEETA, a lot of people do it this way, but you definitely do as well, is that you come in with a plan of how you want to present. But if somebody throws that curveball question at you, and this is, again, pretty standard for ILEETA instructors, if you get selected to teach at ILEETA, but I've definitely seen you do it where I honestly don't know. Let's experiment with that. Or there will be somebody in the class who's like, I have done it, and here's been my experience with it. And you facilitate that well. And I think in this space, like you said, literally any of these LLMs could change the day prior. They could release an update that now does this thing that comes out, the day before you present, and you're there trying to catch up with it. And so again, well-versed in it, but I think there's also kind of this continuous experimentation thing that is happening. So you're going to do that live in the classroom, it sounds like. And I love the idea of having things available for a little bit of read ahead thing, but I think as well as I do, and so does everybody who's listening to this, if you come to the ILEETA conference, and even if I was one of those instructors, and most ILEETA instructors won't do it, will give you the PowerPoint presentation and all my show notes, that you got to go to the class to get the best stuff. And so even if there is a resource sheet, sure, spend some time on it, but show up to the class, I think would be the piece of advice I'd give. So anyway, as we come to the about the 25-minute mark here in a second, real quick, if somebody's sitting on the fence, because that there's like 18 to 20 other classes when you're teaching that somebody else could find themselves in, and we all sit there, which one do I go to, and how do if I'm trying to decide between yours and another great class, what is it that I'm going to walk out with and take back to my agency, and how could I potentially make the decision to come see you for your class?
Well, it's hard because I don't want to deter people, because there are lots of great sessions. So the great thing is that there's 2 sessions. So when I'm planning my own schedule, sometimes if I see 2 at the same time, usually in Guidebook, I star them all off. And then I'll go and check when their second presentation is so that I can balance out my schedule. So I definitely encourage people to do that. But if I did have to, I'm not a super competitive person, but if I do have to compete and convince people, I think the biggest thing my session offers is real world experience. So I'm sharing what I'm actually doing every day. I'm using this stuff. I am designing training, incorporating it into e-learning, into classroom. So this is real world. It's not kind of pie in the sky theoretical. Here's like things that I wish it could do, or you could do this, and I haven't actually used it myself. So I think that's the biggest thing I offer is actual used case study experiences of how these new tools can help us design better training.
I love the humility too of the ILEETA instructor, because everyone's doing the same thing. Well, shoot, I want to go to these other classes. I want to teach my own, but I also want to go to that one. And we've been there, right? Where it's hard to go into your own classroom knowing there's only one of those going on over there and you want to be there. So this is a pretty common answer. And what I'm getting out of these interviews so far is that not only the humility, the humbleness of I've got a great class, but I know the one next door does too. Is the authenticity of this is what I'm doing. If this class fits you and you're working in this space and you have questions, you or somebody you trust should be here to get this information. And I'm just going to echo what you said in that is that there are great classes, but if you need to develop AI skills and you want to learn it from somebody who does this day in and day out and is seen as a resident expert among peers, both in law enforcement training design, but also in other industries, and you are definitely influencing other industries, this is a class worth checking out. And there are two of them, and I cannot recommend highly enough. Consider this one. So without any further ado, what I'd like to do is give you the last word. We're hitting that 25-minute mark here. Any last parting words, recommendations, suggestions to the ILEETA members considering whether or not to attend this conference, or they're already locked in and we're going to see them there? What are your thoughts?
I'm sure we're all going to say the same thing about what a great experience it is. And like you said, it is about the collective knowledge and the collective experience. Yeah, all the instructors are there to present, but we're certainly all there to learn from each other. That's kind of the ILEETA way. It is very much a collective and sharing experience, and there's really nothing else aimed at specifically at law enforcement trainers. There's no other conference that really brings all the trainers together to talk about the frontline reality, our challenges, and kind of how we can use tools and what we can do to sort of overcome our resourcing, budget challenges, et cetera, to create the best training with what we have available.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. I can't wait till March and seeing you and all the other members there, but definitely looking forward to it. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, look for the lady with the blue hair. Right now it's kind of a bluish purple, but look for the lady with the hair and the AI class on AI-powered training from course design to delivery at ILEETA 2026. Kerry, thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe.